Have you ever had that feeling, where you're trying to, explain something really complicated or plan out a big project in your head?
Mm.
It's kind of like you're trying to build a whole house, but you don't have any actual blueprints to work from.
Right, you just have this image in your mind.
Yeah, like you want a bright and open living space for sure.
Mm.
But then when you start actually putting the pieces together mentally,
Right.
suddenly it feels all wrong.
Oh, totally. Like that green kitchen you envision ends up right next to like a noisy laundry room.
Ugh, exactly. Or worse, you get so caught up in the fun stuff that you realize you haven't even thought about where the plumbing's going to go.
And then it's like, oh no!
The whole thing could just fall apart.
It's the power of a plan, a structure, a blueprint.
And that, my friend, is what we are diving deep into today.
We're talking about the art of outlining and how it can help you build something just as important as a physical structure.
Even more so, I'd argue.
Clear and effective communication.
Yes. And even if you're thinking, well, I'm not giving any big speeches anytime soon, just stick with us here.
Because understanding how to create a solid outline.
It's honestly a game changer no matter what you do. It helps you organize your thoughts, make sense of complex information, and really get to the heart of, well, anything.
Think of it like having this secret weapon for like unlocking deeper understanding.
Right. So whether you're trying to write a killer report at work or you're just trying to wrap your head around a new idea, this deep dive, it's going to give you the tools you need.
It's your blueprint for staying organized and on top of things.
Exactly. And our source material today lays out two main types of outlines that are super useful.
Yeah, you've got the preparation outline, which is like super detailed, where you plan out every single thing.
Like down to the last nail.
And then there's the speaking outline, which is more streamlined, more about those key notes you need when you're actually in the moment of communicating.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture. Preparation outline. It sounds intense.
It can be, but it's actually really helpful. Think of it like, when an architect designs a house, they create this super detailed plan, right?
Get every little thing marked out.
Exactly. And that's what the preparation outline is for your communication. It's a way to see the entire structure, like how all the pieces fit together before you even start building.
And its main purpose, as I understand it from the source material, it's really about development, making sure you've thought through your ideas fully and that you have enough solid evidence or examples to back them up.
And not only that, but that everything flows in a logical way that your audience can follow.
Makes sense.
So it's like when you're designing that house, you're figuring out exactly how many windows you want, where every single outlet's going to go.
Oh, and the exact measurements of every room.
Yes, you want to make sure you've got all the pieces and that they fit together correctly before you start building otherwise.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the preparation outline helps you achieve this really critical balance. It ensures that your main points, like the big ideas you want to get across, they get the attention they deserve.
And that related ideas are all grouped together in a way that makes sense.
Right. Have you ever listened to like a presentation where someone just went off on a tangent and got lost in the weeds on like this tiny detail?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
The preparation outline, it can help you avoid that. It helps you develop your ideas logically and proportionally, making sure everything gets the right amount of attention.
So you don't lose your audience along the way.
Exactly.
Okay, so say someone is listening and they're thinking, all right, I want to build my own communication blueprints. What are the non-negotiables? What absolutely has to go into a preparation outline?
Well, the source material gives us some really clear guidelines.
Lay it on us.
The first thing is the specific purpose. It's not technically part of the outline itself, but it's this single clear statement that you need to figure out before you even start outlining.
It's almost like your mission statement.
Yeah, exactly. It defines what you want to achieve with your communication.
So instead of just saying, I want to talk about, I don't know, let's say electric cars.
Right.
Your specific purpose would be more like to inform my audience about the environmental and economic benefits of switching to electric vehicles.
Perfect. Because then everything you put in your outline, every point you make, every piece of evidence you include, it all has to support that specific goal.
It keeps you on track.
Exactly. It's your compass. And then usually after the specific purpose, or sometimes integrated into the introduction of the outline itself, you've got the central idea. It's like the core message, the one big takeaway you want your audience to remember. So for the electric car example, it might be something like switching to electric vehicles offers significant advantages for both the environment and your personal finances.
Right. That's the one line you really want them to walk away with.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then what?
Yeah.
We're getting into the actual structure now.
Right. So then the source material says it's super important to label the main sections of your outline very clearly.
Which are?
Introduction, body, conclusion.
Like the different parts of your house.
Exactly. These labels are just for clarity. They're not part of the formal numbering or lettering system you'll use.
Right.
But their purpose is to make sure you've thought about all the essential pieces of a well-structured presentation. And then you've got this super crucial element,
Which is?
consistent symbolization and indentation.
Uh-oh.
I know it sounds kind of technical,
It does.
but this is basically the visual language of your outline. It shows how all your ideas relate to each other.
So we're talking about like Roman numerals for main points, then indented capital letters for subpoints, then Arabic numerals for sub-subpoint.
Got it. And that indentation, that's key. It helps you instantly understand how everything is connected visually.
A family tree of ideas.
Exactly. Your main points, like the big, most important ideas, are always furthest to the left. And then as you move to supporting details, you indent them further and further to the right.
So you can see like which ideas are the parents and which are the children and grandchildren of the main thought.
Yes, it's a visual map of your thinking. And the source even gives this helpful tip, if you're ever unsure if something is a main point or a supporting detail.
Okay, hit me with it.
They use the example of superstitions, right? So the general statement, like, many superstitions revolve around numbers, that would be a main point.
Broad statement.
Right. But then specific examples, like the superstition around the number 13, those would become indented subpoints.
Because they're supporting the main point.
Exactly. And this can be so helpful for, just understanding how to pick out the core ideas of any information you're looking at.
That makes a ton of sense. It's all about seeing that broadest statement and then figuring out what specific stuff backs it up.
You got it.
Okay, another guideline that really stood out to me from the source material is about using full sentences when you're writing out your main points and subpoints in a preparation outline.
Right.
So why is that so important at this stage?
Because when you just use like vague phrases or single words, you're not really forcing yourself to fully think through your ideas.
You're putting a label on it.
Exactly. The source material, they actually show this contrast where you've got like an ineffective outline entry that just says, civil rights movement.
Or really too broad.
And then they show a full sentence like, the civil rights movement aimed to achieve legal and social equality for African Americans.
Much more specific.
And when you write it out as a full sentence, you've actually developed that complete thought.
It's not just this vague notion floating around in your head.
Yeah. And for you as the speaker, or the writer, whoever's creating this outline, it means a much deeper, more thorough understanding of your own message.
But you forced yourself to actually articulate it.
Exactly.
Okay, what about those little connective phrases? The things that make a presentation flow smoothly, like transitions.
Oh, yeah.
Internal summaries, internal previews. The source material emphasizes that those should also be labeled.
They're so important for creating a presentation that feels cohesive and easy to follow.
You're holding your audience's hand, basically.
Exactly. So when you label those elements in your preparation outline, even though they don't technically fit into the main symbol system you're using for your points, you're making sure that you've actually planned out how you'll move from one point to the next.
Right.
How you'll briefly recap what you've covered and how you'll signal what's coming up.
It's all about creating a clear roadmap for your listeners.
Exactly.
Okay, and of course we can't forget about giving credit where credit is due.
Right.
If you're building an argument or sharing information based on research, you absolutely need to cite your sources. And that's where the bibliography comes in, right?
Yep, the bibliography. This is basically a comprehensive list of every single source you consulted when you were putting your material together. Whether it's books, articles, websites, interviews, it all goes in there.
Every single thing.
The source material mentions a couple of common citation styles like MLA and APA.
Right.
And while we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of formatting right now, it's important to know that citing your sources consistently and accurately, it's really a cornerstone of credible communication.
Like, it's just good practice.
Exactly.
The source material also talks about having a title for your presentation.
The title.
It mentions that in some cases it might be optional, but if you're presenting to a wider audience, it's really key.
Yeah, the title it's like that first impression.
Right. It should be concise, catchy, and give your audience a clear idea of what you're going to be talking about.
It's like the headline of an article. It's your chance to draw people in.
Okay, so we've got this super detailed preparation outline now.
We do.
To really see how all these guidelines come together, the source material actually gives us a sample outline about beneficial bacteria.
Did a good one.
Can we just quickly run through that, just to give our listeners a concrete example of how this all works in practice?
Absolutely. So if you take a look at that sample outline, the first thing you'll notice is that the specific purpose and the central idea are stated right up front.
Setting the stage.
Exactly. And then you see the main sections clearly labeled: introduction, body, conclusion.
The foundation.
Right. And then within the body, you've got the two main points, which are about the role of beneficial bacteria, first in our bodies and then in the environment. Those are marked with Roman numerals.
Roman numerals 1, 2.
Exactly. And underneath those main points, you see the capital letter subpoints, which provide more detail.
So A, B, C, and so on.
Yep. And then, indented even further, you've got Arabic numerals and then even lowercase letters subpoints.
Oh, that's a lot of levels.
It's that visual hierarchy we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look closely, you'll also see that all the main points and subpoints are written as complete sentences.
No shortcuts.
Exactly. And there's also a clearly labeled transition that bridges the discussion from the bacteria in our bodies to the role they play in the environment.
Smooth.
And then finally, if you stand down to the end, you'll find a properly formatted bibliography in MLA style.
Giving credit where it's due.
Exactly. It lists all the sources that were used to develop this presentation. It's a great example of how all those guidelines come together to create a really strong, well-developed plan.
It's impressive. Okay, so once you've got this super detailed blueprint, what happens when it's actually time to, stand up and deliver your message?
That's where the speaking outline comes in.
All right, tell us more about that.
The speaking outline is basically your set of notes, the ones you use when you're actually giving your speech or presentation.
It's like a cheat sheet.
Kind of. It's much shorter than the preparation outline, and it's designed to be more of a memory aid than a full script. The goal is to speak extemporaneously.
Extemporaneously.
It means you're well prepared, you've practiced, but you're not reading directly from a script. You're choosing your exact wording as you go.
So, you have the main ideas and the key points you want to hit, but you're not tied to a specific script.
Exactly. So if the preparation outline is like that full, detailed architectural drawing,
Right.
the speaking outline is more like a few key notes jotted down on a notepad just to remind the builder of the most important steps.
I like that analogy. So what are the essential guidelines for creating a really effective speaking outline?
Well, the first and probably most important is to follow the same visual framework that you established in your preparation outline.
So same Roman numerals, same capital letters, same indentation pattern.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
you've already created those mental links,
Yeah.
When you use that same system in your speaking outline, it's like this instant visual cue.
Your brain already recognizes it.
Right. It makes it much easier to navigate your notes while you're speaking and just see at a glance where you are in your overall structure.
Okay, that makes sense. The source actually shows this side-by-side comparison of a really poorly formatted speaking outline and one that clearly mirrors the structure of the preparation outline. And you can just instantly see how much easier it would be to use that second one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then another point the source makes, which seems obvious, but I guess is worth saying, is to make sure your speaking outline is legible.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You can actually read your own handwriting.
It's so crucial. Use big enough lettering, leave plenty of white space on the page, and write on only one side of your note cards or paper.
All right.
You do not want to be squinting at tiny scribbles while you're trying to connect with your audience.
Oh, that would be a disaster. And speaking of disasters, this is where the principle of keeping it brief comes in.
Yeah.
The source tells this story about a student who had way too much information crammed onto her note cards, and she ended up just reading straight from them.
Oh, no.
And it made her presentation so choppy and disconnected.
That's the biggest pitfall. You don't want your speaking outline to turn into a script.
Right.
Because if you have too much detail, you'll be tempted to just read from it, and you won't be able to make natural eye contact with your audience.
And then the whole point of speaking extemporaneously is lost.
Exactly. Your speaking outline should just be those essential things. Keywords, key phrases, maybe a few important statistics or quotations that you want to deliver word for word.
Right. Just enough to keep you on track without turning into a teleprompter.
Exactly. And the last thing I'll mention about speaking outlines is that they're also a good place to include what the source calls delivery cues.
What are those?
They're basically little reminders to yourself about how you want to deliver certain parts of your message.
So you could underline or bold a keyword that you really want to emphasize.
Yep.
Or even just jot down notes to yourself, like pause here, Speak slowly, with energy. Make eye contact.
Exactly. It's all about reminding yourself of those little nuances that you practice so your delivery has the most impact.
So the speaking outline isn't just about remembering what you want to say, but how you want to say it.
You got it. And the source material also provides a sample speaking outline that goes along with that beneficial bacteria presentation we talked about earlier.
Okay, so how does that condensed version compare to the big detailed one?
If you put them side by side, you'll notice that the speaking outline uses the same Roman numeral and letter structure. But instead of full sentences, it mostly just uses keywords and short phrases for the main points and subpoints.
Streamlined.
Right. And you'll also see those delivery cues I mentioned, like eye contact or slow down, written right into the notes.
Helpful reminders.
Yep. And if there were any direct quotations that the speaker wanted to deliver exactly as written, those would be written out in full in the speaking outline.
Gotcha.
And they've also included brief reminders of the sources for any statistics or testimony they want to cite. Even the core ideas from the conclusion are boiled down to just a few key phrases.
It's like taking that huge preparation outline and extracting just the absolute essential DNA.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something the source mentions briefly about using public speaking skills in your career.
Okay.
They give the example of a defense attorney preparing for their closing argument.
Right.
So how do these outlining principles that we've been talking about apply in, professional settings that aren't necessarily formal presentations?
Well, in a situation like a closing argument, the attorney needs to present a persuasive and logically sound case, right?
Right.
They have to organize all this complex information, key pieces of evidence, legal arguments, and they have to do it in a way that's clear, concise, and ultimately convincing to the jury.
High stakes.
Exactly. And a well-structured outline, whether it's that super detailed internal one or a more concise set of notes for the actual delivery, it helps ensure that they cover all the crucial points in a way that's really impactful.
So even if you're not someone who gives speeches regularly, being able to think structurally and organize your ideas using these outlining principles, it's a super valuable skill in all sorts of professional communication.
It's like a superpower for communication.
Totally. Whether you're writing emails, leading meetings, presenting ideas, whatever, it's all about clarity and coherence.
Exactly. Okay, so just to quickly recap what we've covered today.
Yeah, hit us with the highlights.
We talked about two main types of outlines. The detailed preparation outline, which is your plan for developing your message, and the concise speaking outline, which is your guide for delivering it smoothly.
And both rely on a clear, consistent visual framework to help you, the speaker, organize and recall your ideas effectively.
Exactly. So the big takeaway for you, the listener, is that understanding and using these outlining principles, it gives you this really powerful tool for structuring any kind of information.
I'm all about powerful tools.
Whether you're getting ready for a formal presentation, writing a report, or even just trying to get your head around a new idea, the ability to create a solid, well-structured outline, it can make a huge difference.
It can save you a lot of headaches. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Now that you know the power of having a blueprint, think about other areas in your life where applying these principles of outlining might be helpful.
Good question.
Where else could you use a little more structure, a little more organization to, prevent those metaphorical collapsing roofs and misaligned windows?
I love that. I'm going to have to think about that one.
Me too.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.